Today, we are going to study one of the greatest literary critics and teachers of public speaking in the history of the world, Quintilian. When students hear the word rhetoric, they often think it simply means speaking beautifully. But Quintilian teaches us something much deeper. According to him, speaking well is not enough. A person must also be morally good. That is why Quintilian's famous definition of an ideal orator is, a good man skilled in speaking. This single sentence summarizes his entire philosophy. Our topic is titled, The Classical Architect of Eloquence. Why do we call him an architect? Think about an architect who designs a strong building. Before constructing the roof, the architect first lays a strong foundation. Then he carefully builds each floor, making sure every part supports the next. If the foundation is weak, the whole building can collapse. Quintilian believed education should be built in exactly the same way. He said we cannot suddenly expect someone to become a great speaker. Instead, we must carefully develop that person from childhood. We must shape their character, train their mind, improve their language, teach them literature, help them think logically, and finally teach them the art of speaking. In other words, a great speaker is built step by step, just like a magnificent building. That is why Quintilian is called the architect of eloquence. Now let us understand another important word in our title, eloquence. Eloquence does not simply mean speaking loudly or using difficult words. Eloquence means expressing ideas clearly, effectively, beautifully, and persuasively. Imagine two students giving the same answer in class. The first student knows the answer but speaks nervously, jumps from one idea to another, and confuses everyone. The second student explains the same idea clearly, confidently, logically, and politely. Both students have knowledge, but only the second student is eloquent. Quintilian wanted every educated person to become like the second student. Now look at the subtitle. It says, A Definitive, High-Yield Structural Analysis of Institutio Oratoria. The Latin title Institutio Oratoria simply means, the education of an orator. This is Quintilian's greatest work and one of the most important books ever written on education, rhetoric, and literary criticism. It contains 12 books. These 12 books explain how an ordinary child can gradually become an ideal speaker, teacher, lawyer, leader, and morally responsible citizen. Notice that Quintilian does not begin with speeches. He begins with childhood. This is one of his greatest contributions. He believed education begins the moment a child starts learning, not when the child enters a courtroom or political assembly. Finally, look at the small box at the top that says, Core Focus, the integration of technical rhetoric with absolute moral integrity. This sentence tells us the central idea of today's lesson. Many people can speak effectively. Some may even persuade others to do wrong things. Quintilian rejected this completely. According to him, true eloquence must always be guided by honesty, justice, wisdom, and moral character. For Quintilian, speaking well without being a good person is like owning a sharp sword in the hands of someone without self-control. The skill becomes dangerous, but when knowledge, morality, and eloquence come together, society gains a wise leader. This is why Quintilian remains relevant even today, not only in literature but also in education, law, politics, communication, and leadership. As we move through this presentation, we will see how Quintilian transformed rhetoric from merely an art of persuasion into a complete philosophy of education and human excellence. Now that we have understood who Quintilian is in general, let us move to his life and understand why he became one of the greatest teachers in history. A person's ideas are often shaped by the world they live in. To understand Quintilian's criticism, we must first understand his life, his career, and the political atmosphere around him. Everything on this slide explains why Quintilian thought morality and education were more important than political power. Let us begin with his identity. Quintilian's full name was Marcus Fabius Quintilianus. He was born around 35 CE in Calagurris, in Roman Spain, which is present-day Spain. Although he was born far from Rome, he eventually became one of the most respected intellectuals in the Roman Empire. This teaches us an important lesson. Great scholars are not defined by where they are born. They are remembered because of their knowledge, dedication, and contribution to society. For example, imagine two students. One studies in a famous city school, while another studies in a small village school. If the village student works hard and gains deep knowledge, that student can become greater than the city student. Quintilian's own life proves this. He rose from a provincial town to become the greatest teacher of rhetoric in Rome. Now let us understand what rhetoric actually means. Many students misunderstand this word. Rhetoric is not lying. Rhetoric is not manipulation. Rhetoric is the art of expressing ideas effectively so that people understand, appreciate, and are persuaded by them. Imagine a doctor explaining a serious illness to a patient. The doctor has medical knowledge. But if the doctor cannot explain it clearly, the patient remains confused. Now imagine another doctor explaining the same illness using simple words and calm language. The patient understands immediately. Both doctors have knowledge. Only the second doctor has effective rhetoric. This is exactly what Quintilian wanted. Knowledge should be communicated clearly. Now let us move to the second point. The imperial connection. Quintilian eventually became the tutor to the heirs of Emperor Domitian. A tutor is not simply a teacher. A tutor is someone trusted with shaping the minds and character of future rulers. Think about the importance of this responsibility. If you teach an ordinary student, you influence one life. If you teach the future emperor, your ideas may influence an entire empire. This shows how highly respected Quintilian was. The Roman government trusted him not only because he was intelligent but also because he was known for his integrity. Imagine a school principal selecting one teacher to personally guide the school's future leaders. The principal would not choose the loudest teacher. The principal would choose the wisest, most disciplined, and most trustworthy teacher. That is exactly the position Quintilian held. Now we come to one of the greatest milestones in educational history. The slide says, the milestone, awarded the first official state's salaried chair of rhetoric by Emperor Vespasian in 71 CE. Let us understand why this is historically important. Before Quintilian, many teachers earned money privately from students. Education depended largely on personal arrangements. But Emperor Vespasian made a revolutionary decision. He created an official government-funded teaching position for rhetoric. Quintilian became the first person to hold that position. In modern terms, imagine the government creating the very first official professorship in communication or public speaking at a national university. That is how significant this appointment was. The Roman government was saying something important. Education is not merely a private activity. It is valuable enough for the state itself to support. Notice the note at the bottom. Quintilian received 100,000 sesterces every year. A sesterce was a Roman coin. This was an extremely generous salary. The amount tells us how much Rome valued education and eloquence. Today, governments pay professors in universities because education benefits the whole nation. Quintilian was one of the earliest examples of this idea. This is why examinations often ask, who was the first public salaried teacher of rhetoric in Rome? The answer is Quintilian. Remember the memory clue. Vespasian gave the salary. Whenever you hear Vespasian, immediately think of government salary. Now let us move to the most important historical background. The political reality. This point explains why Quintilian's ideas became different from earlier Roman thinkers like Cicero. Quintilian lived during the reign of Emperor Domitian. Domitian ruled with great authority. Many people describe his rule as harsh and authoritarian. Open criticism of the emperor could be dangerous. People had to be very careful about what they said publicly. Now imagine living in a society where speaking freely could put your life at risk. Would people openly criticize the government? Probably not. Instead, they would become cautious. This political situation influenced Quintilian deeply. Earlier Roman writers like Cicero believed that an orator should actively participate in politics and defend the republic. But Quintilian realized that political freedom was no longer the same. Instead of encouraging dangerous political confrontation, he focused on something that no ruler could easily take away: personal character. He believed that even if political circumstances are difficult, a person can still remain honest, disciplined, educated, and morally upright. This was his solution. Instead of saying, "Fight every political battle," he said, "First become a good human being. Only then can your words have real value." Imagine a teacher working in a school where many problems exist. The teacher may not be able to change the entire education system overnight. But the teacher can still teach honestly, treat students fairly, and inspire them every day. That is personal moral integrity. Quintilian believed lasting change begins there. This is why the slide says his focus shifted from Republican political resistance to personal moral integrity and civic duty. Now let us understand the phrase civic duty. Civic duty simply means fulfilling our responsibilities as responsible members of society. For a student, civic duty means studying honestly and respecting others. For a judge, it means delivering justice without corruption. For a doctor, it means treating patients sincerely. For a politician, it means serving the public instead of personal interests. For Quintilian, an orator was not simply someone who spoke well. An orator was someone who served society through truthful and ethical speech. This brings us back to his famous principle: a great speaker must first be a good person. Speaking is only the outer skill. Character is the inner foundation. Without character, eloquence becomes manipulation. With character, eloquence becomes leadership. That is why Quintilian's philosophy remains relevant even today. Whether we become teachers, lawyers, judges, administrators, politicians, journalists, or public speakers, Quintilian reminds us that technical skill alone is never enough. Knowledge must always be guided by honesty, responsibility, and moral integrity. This idea became the foundation of his educational philosophy and shaped everything he later wrote in his masterpiece, Institutio Oratoria. In the previous slide, we learned about Quintilian's life and how his experiences shaped his philosophy. Now we come to the heart of Quintilian's entire theory. If you remember only one idea from Quintilian for your examination, remember this slide. Everything he wrote in Institutio Oratoria revolves around this one formula. Look carefully at the slide. On the left, we have two separate qualities. The first is absolute moral virtue, written in Latin as ver bonus. The second is supreme technical mastery, written in Latin as dicendi peritus. These two qualities are joined together with a plus sign. When they are combined, they produce the ideal orator. This is not just a formula. It is Quintilian's philosophy of education, leadership, and human character. Let us understand each part slowly. We will begin with the first quality. Part 1. Absolute moral virtue. Ver bonus. The Latin words ver bonus literally mean, a good man. Notice that Quintilian does not begin with speaking. He begins with goodness. This is very important. Today, many people believe success comes from intelligence, talent, or communication skills. Quintilian disagrees. He says the first qualification of an orator is not intelligence. It is character. But what does good actually mean? Does it simply mean being polite? No. For Quintilian, a good person is someone who is honest, just, trustworthy, disciplined, courageous, and responsible. Such a person respects truth more than personal success. Such a person never uses words to deceive innocent people. Imagine a judge. The judge is brilliant. He knows every law perfectly. But suppose he accepts bribes and gives unfair judgments. Would we call him a great judge? Certainly not. Now imagine another judge. He also knows the law. But he is completely honest. He treats every person equally. People trust him. Who is truly great? The second judge. The difference is not knowledge. The difference is moral character. That is exactly what Quintilian means by ver bonus. Character comes before talent. Let us take another example. Imagine two teachers. Both know English literature extremely well. The first teacher humiliates students, lies about marks, and teaches only for money. The second teacher encourages students, teaches sincerely, admits mistakes, and genuinely wants students to learn. Which teacher would you remember throughout your life? Most people would choose the second teacher. Again, character makes the difference. Quintilian says that eloquence without character is incomplete. Now let us move to the second part. Part 2. Supreme Technical Mastery. Dicendi peritus. Now we come to the second requirement. The Latin phrase dicendi peritus means skilled in speaking. Notice something important. Being a good person alone is not enough. Imagine someone who is very honest and kind. Everyone respects that person, but whenever they try to explain an idea, nobody understands them. Their thoughts are confusing, their sentences are incomplete, their arguments are weak. Although they are morally excellent, they cannot effectively guide society. Quintilian says that goodness must be supported by skill. That skill is rhetoric. But what exactly is technical mastery? It includes many abilities. A speaker should know how to organize ideas logically. They should choose the right words. They should speak clearly. They should understand grammar. They should know literature. They should use examples effectively. They should persuade people through reason instead of emotion alone. They should know when to speak and when to remain silent. These abilities do not appear automatically. They are learned through education and continuous practice. Think about learning to drive a car. A person may be very responsible, but responsibility alone cannot make someone a safe driver. They must also know how to use the steering wheel, brakes, gears, mirrors, and traffic rules. Character is necessary. Skill is also necessary. Only then does someone become a good driver. Similarly, Quintilian says that an orator must possess both virtue and technique. Now let us combine these two ideas. The plus sign. The plus sign on this slide is extremely important. It tells us that one quality cannot replace the other. Many people have technical skill but lack morality. Others have morality but lack communication skills. Quintilian says neither is sufficient. The ideal orator needs both. Let us understand this with a simple comparison. Imagine 4 people. The first person is honest but cannot explain ideas clearly. The second person speaks beautifully but lies frequently. The third person is intelligent but selfish. The fourth person is honest, knowledgeable, wise, and communicates clearly. According to Quintilian, only the fourth person deserves to be called an orator. This is why the plus sign is the most important symbol on this slide. It represents balance, character plus competence, virtue plus knowledge, integrity plus eloquence. The ideal orator. Now let us look at the final box. The ideal orator. Who is this ideal orator? According to Quintilian, an orator is much more than a public speaker. He is an educator, a lawyer, a leader, a citizen, a thinker, a role model, someone whose words improve society. Imagine a doctor giving health advice. If the doctor is knowledgeable but dishonest, people may suffer. Imagine a lawyer who is brilliant but uses his intelligence to protect criminals through lies. Imagine a politician who speaks wonderfully but constantly spreads false information. These people may be skilled speakers, but Quintilian refuses to call them true orators. Why? Because they fail the first condition. They are not verbose. Now imagine another person, a teacher who explains difficult ideas simply, a lawyer who fights honestly for justice, a leader who keeps promises, a judge who refuses corruption. These people combine morality with communication. They are closer to Quintilian's ideal. Quintilian and Cato the Elder. Look at the sentence at the bottom of the slide. It says, Quintilian popularized Cato the Elder's definition. This is an important examination point. The famous definition, ver bonus dicendi peritus, did not originally come from Quintilian. It is traditionally associated with Cato the Elder. However, Quintilian accepted it completely, explained it in great detail, and made it the central principle of his educational philosophy. That is why students often associate the definition with Quintilian. Remember this carefully for examinations. Cato gave the definition. Quintilian made it famous and developed it into a complete educational theory. Why eloquence without morality is dangerous. The final sentence on the slide says, eloquence without morality is a dangerous weapon. Let us understand why. Imagine someone who can speak beautifully. They know exactly how to persuade people. But instead of speaking the truth, they spread lies. Instead of encouraging peace, they create hatred. Instead of helping society, they manipulate people for personal gain. Their eloquence becomes dangerous. History gives us many examples of people who used powerful speeches to mislead entire nations. Their words were impressive, but their intentions were wrong. Quintilian warns us against this. He says speech is like a sharp sword. In the hands of a wise and honest person, it protects justice. In the hands of a dishonest person, it becomes a weapon. Therefore, communication must always be guided by morality. This idea is still relevant today. Social media influencers, journalists, lawyers, teachers, judges, politicians, and business leaders all possess the power to influence others. Quintilian reminds us that influence carries responsibility. The greater our ability to speak, the greater our responsibility to speak truthfully. So, the entire message of this slide can be remembered in one simple sentence. According to Quintilian, the ideal orator is not merely an excellent speaker, but a morally good person whose knowledge, character, and eloquence work together for the benefit of society.